Often when we download or receive third-party models, we want to reduce the model size. And that's what we're going to focus on with this video. So we're going to come in here, we're going to have about 8 topics we're going to cover. We'll cover them each individually. Before we get into the real topics, just an introduction. When we get these models from third parties, we want to make sure we have detail that we do not need in that model. If the model has cosmetic and unnecessary detail, it makes the component model file size unnecessarily large, which will slow the opening of model files, slow the manipulation of models, and slow the regeneration of 2D drawings. And you can see an example here of a part that was brought in. It goes from two megabytes, and we get it down to 426 kilobytes. So when we have utility content downloads, utility content presently is creating configurators as Inventor 2022. The static parts library that are uploaded to the site are the version as uploaded. None of the static parts presently will be beyond Inventor 2022, and that may change in the future. So you can see with configurators, the download options are IPT and 3D DWG. Those are the only version options right now, and that might change in the future, but right now that's what we have. If you look at the static parts, we also get the steps. So we got IPT, 3D, DWG in the step files. So when we look at the static part items, typically you want to download the step file if you're not using Inventor 2022 or later. If you're pre-2022 Inventor, you probably want the step file. Most often you want to bring the configurator down as an IPT. If it's an older Inventor version that you're using, like a 2021, it would behave like a derived part in your Inventor. The key methods we're going to show are going to be simplify from assembly, simplify part with direct edit, and simplify part with simplification tools. Those are the key ones. So let's start looking at the methods. In this example, we're going to simplify from an assembly. So I have my assembly template open. I've saved it. And I'm going to import my part. I'm going to come up here and import. I can import an IPT. I should say I can place an IPT, or I can import a CAD file. So I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to import. I'm going to grab my step file. You can see it's quite large, 5 megabytes, and I'll say open. I'll make sure I'm going to convert the model, that I'm going to convert with solids, and I'm going to bring in the individual multi-body part, and I'll say okay to that. And there's our part. So I'm going to orientate it correctly, and then we're going to simplify. All right, I put in my constraints, and I have the orientation I want. What we're going to do next is we are going to simplify. So I'm going to save it before I simplify it. Save and save often. It's going to make a IPT out of it right away because it's trying to save. And I'm going to just call this number 4 because I've tried this a few times. I'm going to go save. All right, so we're going to simplify the part. You can see we got rounded edges, we got a number of fillets, but I want to preserve some of these items. So I'm going to come into the Simplify tool. And I'm going to come in and take the defaults. I don't want to exclude anything, but I want to select things I want to keep. So I'm going to select some items. I want to keep my bolting cylinders. So I'm going to select those guys, just so I know that there's bolting there. And I'm going to select the ones out here as well. I also want to keep my radiuses here, that it doesn't turn those into some other shape. So I want to make sure these are round for the cave of the place. So those are the items I want to keep. Next, I want to come down here. I want to make sure I have my template. And with that, I'm going to say OK. So I'm trying to get rid of everything up here and say OK. It's going to work for a few minutes. And there's my new part. I still have my assembly here. And there's my part. And we're going to look at this part. I'm going to save it before I go anywhere. And you can see some of the areas that it didn't do. I have a sharp edge here, and I still have a rounded edge here. So I have some sharp edges and rounded edges. I go to the original part. Let's look at the original part. And we have some round edges here, all round up here. So we got lots of rounded edges and fillets. And we come into the finished part, we have squared off parts, but we still have some fillets in here. So we'd want to get rid of those fillets. So let's look at the comparison. This is FEV of 4000 and the file size is 2 megabytes. This is the original. If I just brought it in without simplification, this is simplified. So I'm going to bring in the data for this one. So let's come into our part data. If you have the form, we can use the form here, part data. And here's my part data. So I'm going to just say OK to that. Let's copy the clipboard and we'll just put that in here. All right, so now we're down to 2,700 and 1,100 kilobytes. This is 4,000 and 2,000. So you can see it is simplified. We can go further now. If we use in the tools, go 3D model, and we would use these. And this is the fourth method I'm going to show, so we'll talk about that later. But using this, I was able to position it, orientate it the way I wanted to. It did some simplification for me. Now I can go further and simplify it further. Okay, in this example, we're going to simplify with direct edit. I have my template open. I've saved it as simplify with direct edit. And I'm going to import my part. I can import it. If I just had an IPT, I had just opened my IPT and use direct edit as well. So I'm going to import my part. And I'm going to make sure it's solids. I have my multi-body part and I'll say OK. With that, we have my multi-body part. You can see all my bodies. You can also see that it's an orientation that I would not prefer to have. But in the meantime, we are going to work with the direct edit. So I'm just going to look down here on this corner because this is a good area to look at. We're going to use the direct edit tool. And you can see I'm going to direct edit faces that I select. I'm going to delete the faces that I select. I'm going to do a preview and I'm going to select those faces. So I'm going to select the radius out here. If you look at what my preview is, it's just that radius. So it's not telling me it's doing anything. So I'm going to select the radius on either side. And now you can see that it's actually done something. It's going to take that off. So when this radius was originally made in the original software, it was done with a fillet attached to it somehow. So it's basically somewhat dependent on how the original part was made and how the database is compiled, I guess, after that. So now I know I need to take off the radiuses on either side because I get that preview. So you can see the tediousness involved here is that I have to go through and pick every part, every face that I want to remove, and I'm going to say OK. Now I've removed those pieces. What we get then now is that we have a direct edit feature. As we know with Inventor, the taller our Inventor browser is, the heavier the part. And what we're doing is adding features. So if I went through and did a direct edit on all of these items and started working on it, I will end up with more direct features in here and I'd have a larger part file. All right. So yes, we can go through here and direct edit. Some do that, but if you follow the reduce model size document, I'm going to scroll down here, and part of the steps here, let's go through here and get it fit the width. So we import the file, and this is what we want to do is follow this step. These steps here is once you've simplified the part, you want to export it back to a step file. All right. And this will strip extraneous data out of it. So with these added features we get, with direct edit, we're able to strip that data out and then we can have a smaller file as that step. You'd want to bring that step file probably back into an assembly so you can orientate it the way you wish and then go back and export it again as a single part, or derive it into a single part the way you may want to have it. Once you've done that, of course, you add the metadata in SDS Intelligence, the work geometry, any other information you need to add as well. Okay, this is the third method. This is simplification tool. So we're going to simplify with simplification tools. I'm going to import my step file. If I just had an IPT, I could do the same work just in an IPT. So I'm going to come into import. I'm going to import my step. Make sure that I only have my solids and that it's multi-body part, and I can say OK. And you'll see it's placed not in the orientation we want, and we'd have to fix that later. What I have is my multi-body part, and what I want to do now is do some simplification. The simplification tools are here under simplification. To get these, if you don't have them available, you want to make sure in tools, add-ins, you have BIM Simplify turned on. So I'll come into my simplification tools. I'm going to remove details. I'm going to just go through, and I want to make sure all faces are selectable. And I'm going to start selecting a face. So if I come up here and select the face, I want to select the face up here. I'm going to move details here. Kind of like what we did on the other one, I'm having to pick the radius on the outside as well. Whoever made this originally, the database remembers how it was made, and I think the fillet was added after the fillets on the outside edges were done. So I'll say OK to that. And you can see I was able to replace those items and just have a regular chamfer. My next point, I'd have to go through again, kind of like the direct edit tool. I'd have to just keep replacing pieces just like that and say OK, and I can pick multiple pieces like that. What we can also do is you can also do a number of items by selecting a window, but it's got to be compatible with selecting that window, just like direct edit. So with that, you'd have to pick all of those items. With direct edit and as well as delete face, we're going to have more features added. And we know with the Inventor browser, the more features we have in it, the slower the process, the larger the model size. So what we'd want to do is take this, once we have it simplified, we'd follow through with what it says in the reduce model size document. We would come through here and we'd follow the steps that right here. Once we update and we have it finished the way we want it, we want to export it back to a step file. All right, once we have exported it back to a step file, we'll strip extraneous data out of it, and then we import it again, put it in an assembly, rearrange it in the assembly orientation, and then create a derived part from that or a simplified part from that, and you get down to getting the smallest possible model. Here's a simplified part comparison. The tools that we showed previously, or the methods we showed previously, were used to get to this point. To what extent a part gets simplified is dependent on the user. This is the original part, and what we're going to do is take this original part and we're going to simplify it down to a medium fidelity, what we're going to call a medium fidelity part. And that's severely removing details, fillets, holes, chamfers, and that's where we're going to get at. So this is original, was 4,000 FEV, faces, edges, vertices, and 2 megabytes, 2.5 megabytes. So I brought the file into my assembly using normal place tool. And I did something further. I created a medium fidelity part to start with. I created a model state to start with. I'm going to activate that. And you can see I've removed bodies that I know I don't want in here anyway for a medium fidelity. So I've stripped it down a little bit further. And now I'm going to run my simplified tool, and we're going to go further with the simplified tool. I'm going to come down and simplify. I'm going to simplify this to medium fidelity. I'm going to accept everything here. I'm not going to preserve any features. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use my template. I'm going to use this tool here, which is single body tools. I'm going to merge it together. I'm going to make sure I fill voids and remove internal details. I want as much gone as I can. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And here is that same part. We have 1000 FEV and 679 kilobytes. So it is reduced greatly, but we want to go further. So by using tools like delete face, direct edit, I was able to remove it further down, and now we're down to 800 FEV from 1000. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a fair amount of radiuses removed. The file size is of course bigger because we're adding features, and we know that if we add features, the longer the browser tree, the heavier the model is going to be. So our last step, and it's in the reduce model size document, is to export it as a step and re-import it into a part. And that's what we've done here. So now we've exported and brought it back in. You can see now I'm only down to 400 kilobytes, and I still have a fairly high FEV, but it's far reduced from the original that we had. I'll bring that up. The original here that we had of 4,002 megabytes, and now we are down to 804 400 kilobytes. So it's greatly reduced, and this we would call a medium fidelity part. It could go further. We could always go further in simplifying it. If it's a low fidelity part, this would probably be a shoebox. All right. So that's where we're going to leave it at for medium fidelity. With utility content, when we download a configurated part or a static part, you have choices to download. And once you have it downloaded, you can manipulate them. I want that to be clear. So you can manipulate them, and you have properties. It's a multi-body part. You have properties, and you can suppress always or maybe on a parameter change. So you can suppress the bodies, and you can replace that body with a new extruded parts, or place it into an assembly with a different extruded base. Let's say in this case it's a base. We can put that in higher assembly, put it together, and then export it to a step file or a IPT drive to an IPT and have a new base. So I want to make sure it's available to do that. You can also extrude holes. You can extrude shapes, however you need to do it. Another method here is if you look on this side, once you have something extrude, you can use this tool here to suppress, open or close on a parameter 0 or 1, and it's going to suppress this, and you can set it up so that it can have open or close positioning if it's a multi-bodied part, and we can do this. So I want to make sure everyone's aware of what we can do with utility content parts once we download them. For a summary, I just want to note that the time it takes to remodel the component, it's cost effective in relation to the slower performance of a complex model in a large substation assembly. Files are open many times during the life of a project. So when you have a slow assembly, that takes time every time you open it. If it's 5 minutes, it's not too bad. If it's 15 minutes, it's getting bad. So what you want to do is keep these parts simplified and lower detail so that you can open the model faster. It may be opened 100 times during that project in 1 year. In the lifetime of it, it would be many more times. Make sure we look at the document reduce model size. That has a little bit more detail than what we covered in the video, just to make sure by exporting as individual components that you can simplify individual components a little bit easier than the larger component. And it also has the recommended steps to complete the simplification of the 3D models by exporting it back to a step file and re-importing it. It just strips it down to the smallest you can get it. If you look in this example here, we went from 2 megabytes to 426 kilobytes by following the simplification methods in the reduce model size document.